All right, we're going to get started. We have a really awesome, amazing guest. We've had some great interviews.
Hi.
Yes, Uyen. Her name is pronounced Uyen. I had to learn that myself. So Uyen Nguyen. So she's an amazing guest. We are super happy to have her here. She is the owner of this really fabulous restaurant that I happened upon, and I didn't even know her or anything about her, but I'll tell you a little bit about my experience at your restaurant. I've only gone once, but definitely plan to go back. I was leaving a talk at Seattle University and I was starving. I was starving. And so, of course, we use this thing here, right? So I use my phone and I'm like, I am vegetarian. So I was looking up good vegetarian options, right, in the area. And it said new. And I was like, huh. And so we parked and there was really nowhere to sit. It was like stacked. And so when we went in, they were like, okay, we walked back all the way to the back and there was a couple seats at the little bar area. So, and I don't drink and my friend don't drink, but we were like, okay, we're going to just sit here because we can eat here. And we asked the guy, we was like, can we sit here? He was like, sure. He was super friendly. But let me just tell you about the food. I'm going to get into this, Uyen, but I just got to tell them about the food in case they haven't been. Type in the chat box if you've ever been to New, N-U-E in Seattle. If you've ever been there or if you've not been there yet. I'm just telling y'all about the food and then we're going to get into the owner. But the food was so good. We had this salad. It was like, it was crunchy and had some things that were fried, but some things that was fresh. It was amazing. I was like, oh, this is so good. And I just kept eating it. And then we had that pineapple cornbread. Oh my goodness. That was amazing. Yeah, that pineapple cornbread was amazing. And then we just had a couple of different dishes. So I just want to say that I've been there. I truly enjoyed it. And let's see if anybody else have been there while we're talking. I'm going to introduce Uyen. Uyen, how did you come up with this concept of New?
Yeah, so my husband, Chris, and I, we travel a lot. We actually got married fairly late in life. So by the time we met, we each have traveled to about 60 different countries. Wow. And it sounds very luxurious, and it is. But, you know, I was a refugee. So, I mean, I came here with literally no money. So it wasn't until when I got older, around 23, that I actually started to travel. And I basically just did a lot of backpacking and so on. So, and a combination of backpacking and just, I chose all kind of jobs that allowed me to travel. So, so the passion for that has been there since I was very young. But it wasn't until when we got married and we decided that, you know, we just got tired of working for other people. And I actually had pretty lucrative jobs. So in retrospect, that was probably a stupid thing to do, to just and just become like this broke ass, you know, entrepreneur. But
love will make you do some crazy things, right?
Yeah. So that's how I got started.
How many years have y'all been in this restaurant industry?
5.5 years.
Okay.
So, and it's really interesting because literally about a month before the whole pandemic happened, I actually finally thought, I was like, you know, I'm finally able to get this thing, you know, self-sustaining, and I don't have to be here every day. I'm going to do my own little project, maybe work on nonprofit and all that. And it just completely stripped everything apart. So,
yeah. And so let's talk about that. Thank you for leading right into it. Let's talk about this COVID-19, the shifts that you guys have made, the lessons that you've learned. You know, you said you've been doing this for 5.5 years. You were getting to a point where you were feeling good about where the stabilization of your restaurant. And then all of a sudden, boom, the pandemic hits. You know, what type of lessons have you guys learned? What type of shifts have you made?
Yeah, so just we're just kind of paint the landscape a little bit. You know, before the whole pandemic hit, our restaurant was busy, kind of like the way you describe it. Actually, the last Yelp review that we got right before the pandemic happened was from a disgruntled customer because he had to be on the wait list for an hour in order to get seated, and he got really mad. I was like, well, that's what happens, you know?
Right. We happy that you waited.
Yeah, and then and it's really interesting because right before this, in January, late January, you know, I knew about the virus already, partly because I was planning a visit to see my dad in Vietnam. And my dad is 79 now, so I was like, you know, I got to do this, because if this is anything like SARS or anything like that, that this might be my last chance to see him. So I would say I was one of the, you know, earlier kind of like, sorry, I realized that I'm not very good with the Zoom thing, and I realized I left my door open. Can you close the door, Anne?
This is real life. This is real life.
I know.
You okay?
So anyhow, I guess I had this virus in the back of my mind before most Seattleites did. And so I went to visit my dad, you know, with masks and everything. I actually brought a bunch of masks to him because I thought like things were going to get really bad in Asia, not in the US. So anyhow, when I came back and I heard about the, and shortly after, we had the first death in Washington State, and I still remember that day, February 29th. I just knew that things were going to get really bad really quickly. And so, you know, it quickly transformed from us getting bad review for not seating customer, you know, waitlisted customer within an hour to an empty restaurant. You know, we went, revenue went down to someday 10% of what it used to be. You know, on good days, it started being like 20 to 25%. And so, and we continue to kind of move forward. We kept open. You know, the other thing is that my background, I was trained as a scientist, you know, so during this whole time, we kept open, but we just focus on the science, really, you know, like things, we started doing things that other people didn't do, like, you know, having clean pen versus dirty pen, because your touch point is where the contact and transference really happen versus like, you know, dirt on the floor or whatever.
Right.
But and then we also had takeout. We actually had takeout for a while, but you know, when the governor decided that restaurant needs to be closed, and you know, if you've been following this virus, you realize that it's a curve, right? And then there's an inflection point within that multiplier effect that you just have to close, or you just have to enforce strict social distancing. So I fully supported him for doing that, even though we were one of the restaurants that continued to be open, you know, on March 14th, and then March 15th was when he made the announcement. So, but with, you know, with our experience doing takeout before and so on, it still was highly difficult for us to pivot. Why? A couple of reasons. One is that, you know, takeout used to be 10% of our business. Now it's 100%. So it just that transition, right? And then also the transition for everyone else to also start doing all these takeout, you know, and so on too. And then on top of that, again, back on March 15, we had no idea what was going to happen. Like, you know, we have no idea whether there's loans available, you know, the unemployment benefits and for our staff. And then even like, you know, rent deferment, whether we can even get it or not. So we just basically just try really hard to just continue to be open. And then I guess my other thought was that a lot of my restaurateur colleagues really believed that this thing was going to only last for 3 weeks to maybe a month. And so they themselves temporarily closed because they just figured that it's not worth it to do the takeout. We just reopen in a month. And but I didn't see that at all. I actually think this is going to drag out for a long time. And so that was kind of like the basis behind why we just decided that, you know, we're just going to continue to be open on March 16th, but we're just going to do the takeout and figure out how to do, you know, to get new revenue. We started, you know, selling wine to go. We started selling cocktail kit. We started just new for
yeah, whatever you want, we got it.
Oh yeah, no, we just basically did everything under the sun. You know, this is where I think being a scrappy entrepreneur actually help. Like we have very little ego on what we need to look like and so on. So we just, so it was just me. And on March 15th, because of just our finances was so uncertain, we finally had to do what we didn't want to do for a long time, was to do a massive layoff, or, you know, technically furlough. Because you actually can put your employees on what is they call standby unemployment, so that, you know, you get them back and so on. So basically from March 15th, where we still had a decent amount of staff being employed, to March 16th, where it was only 2 employees, basically my executive chef and another cook, and then me and Chris. And we had to take ourselves off payroll too, to make sure that we just kind of have enough reserve to make it through. So, so it's been 2.5 months, and if you combine new now, you see, like, you know, we have 2 freezers that are in the middle of our dining room. We are ordering 1 more, you know, refrigerator. We have like to-go boxes stacked up how high, all over the bar area, the place where you used to sit. So it's a little bit crazy, you know. I think a lot of even policymaker out there just assume that in order for us to pivot to the takeout or pivot back from the takeout, it's actually a fairly easy process, but it's not. It's not. You're actually doing a brand new business model, you know?
It really is. And I'm glad that you've identified that, because I speak with entrepreneurs all day, every day, like from 7 a.m. till sometimes 9 p.m. And they don't understand when I talk about, okay, what's your post-COVID-19 business model? They're like, I'm just going to go back. I'm like, no. It's just not that simple. Like, it's going to take some work. It's going to take some strategy. And so I'm glad that you guys realize that. Now, were you able to get like the PPP, the payment protection program, and the EIDL loan to help you bring your employees back? Were you able to do that?
So just a couple of things regarding that, like that headaches that you guys might not see from the outside, you know, because a lot of these loans that come in, and I right after, basically starting on March 16th, I would have, you know, very good intention friends who are just forwarding me all these different loans that we can apply for. But, you know, a lot of these loans are for, let me see, for, you know, small businesses that have, you know, less than 5 employees. I remember the first week that there was a loan that was going out. And of course, none of the restaurant qualified for something like that. And then there were like Facebook grant or Amazon grant, where you have to be close to their campus. And so most of those we just don't qualify for. We are in kind of like, I would consider us sort of like the middle class, where you're not really in one poor bucket, but you're not really in the rich bucket. You're just kind of like, you know, suffering, but not sure where to go and get help, that kind of thing. And so for a long time, actually, we didn't get anything. I would say, so last week was the first time, was when we first got the PPP loan, which is basically very behind relative to some of our, you know, peer restaurateurs. So for the longest time, we just basically just assumed that we were not going to get anything, and just kind of tried to pivot around that. And luckily, I've been doing a lot of community work, you know, and so my friends started doing innovative things like selling our jerk chicken with the flowers. I don't know if you heard about all these women who are selling flowers from the mom farm.
Flowers.
Oh yeah, they were like, you know, while you go and pick up your flowers, you can pick up my friend jerk chicken from New. But
power of community. That's the power of community. I love it.
It really is. It really is, because you see, these flowers, you know, from the Pike Marketplace farmers that would have gone to waste, and then some of my girlfriends were key people behind starting that initiative to essentially help these farmers sell the flowers. And so while they were seeing us struggling, they like, you know, give me your cocktail kit and give me your jerk chicken, I'll sell it too. That's basically the new economy right now.
It really is. We got to help each other. Amberin asks, how are you staying resilient during so much operational change and combined with the stress, you know, the personal stress, the professional stress? How are you staying so resilient as an individual?
Yeah, I think this is where, for better or for worse, being a refugee actually helped, you know. And being a refugee also means that, you know, we went through many cycle of just trauma and turmoil ourselves. So I was actually in the process of working on writing an article for this for Oxfam, because I'm an assistant on the Planet Ambassador for Oxfam, and one of my I guess a role was to bring advocacy towards the craziness that is going on for refugees all around the world right now. But essentially, you know, so let's look at some of the I guess discomfort that we're all experiencing right now, right? One, we're kind of like trapped in 1 to 2 mile radius of where our house is. That's basically a refugee camp for you, you know. But when I was a refugee, I was in there for 1.5 years. Refugees nowadays have to spend it in refugee camp for 17 years. So, you know, our refugee experience basically is like, oh, you know what, we're gonna stuck in this 2 mile radius for a long time, but we got this. The other part of just, you know, dealing with death and not being able to see your relatives and all of that. I didn't see my dad for 10 years after we escaped Vietnam. And so I've dealt with that too, you know, seeing the loved ones that you die and not knowing what to do or how to handle it. You know, I watched my mom and my siblings die and I couldn't do anything. So in many ways, it's like, I've been kind of wired for this. And I really think that, I mean, it's the same experience that, or skill set that I used to overcome that. It's just, you have to really focus on the positive of everything that is going on and really rely on your community. And I really don't think the community has to be that big, you know. It's great if it's big, but for a long time, my only community was my older brother, and we just really rely on each other and prop each other up, you know. And I think the last part is because I went through all of that, and you know, here I am sitting here speaking to a class of really intelligent and wonderful people. It just, you know, my life turned out okay. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is that even through all that hardship, my life turned out okay. So so you have to kind of put on that lens and perspective and just continue to be the person that you're proud of, you know. So
I like that. I like your optimism. I like the fact that you can look at all this and then look back. And I think people who have gone through so much, they are able to go through so much more. It says, I've heard before, what doesn't kill you just makes you stronger. And so it just sounds like you are strong, you know, and that's because of what you've gone through. So I hear that you're a scientist and you left all this grandiose job and big money to become poor. You didn't really come poor. You didn't really become poor, but you're also a philanthropist. Tell us a little bit about like where you put your money and where you put your efforts, you know, as far as like increasing the economic opportunity for others. You know, the theme, in case you don't know, the theme is racism is a leadership issue, right? That's the theme of Leadership Tomorrow for this year. And of course, you've seen some of that. You maybe possibly experienced some of that. So being the person that you are, the experiences that you've had, and really your optimism that's just shining through right now, where do you put your efforts?
Yeah, that's really interesting that you, I did not know about the topic for today, but let me just drop in the chat this article that was, that featured me a couple of years ago for you guys to read. But so where I put my energy, you know, like I've done humanitarian work for quite a long time, starting when I was a teenager, actually. And a lot of it was kind of like humanitarian work regarding taking care of orphan kids, you know, providing aids, whether it's blanket, rice, you know, food, whatever. And It wasn't until I would say my mid to late 30s that I don't know why it took me so damn long, honestly, but it took me quite a while to make the connection that I'm just kind of like solving a lot of downstream consequences of actions of people who are up at the top making this really just, frankly, some of them are just really stupid and pure, stupid and just selfish decisions, you know? And so once I made that connection, that's when I started creeping up more towards the top, and trying to change that from there. So lately I've been focused on a combination of both, still doing humanitarian work, you know, providing, because here's the thing, if people are hungry, if they're starving, they still need food, right? But at the same time, you can also work to change the policymakers at the top, because I mean, so many of these decisions get trickled down, right? And so for the past several years, I focused more on getting right people to be elected to public office, really working on policy changes, really working with the influencer of the community to make the changes happen. Because again, you know, feeding the poor and all of that can only go so far if the problem just not only just continue, but in many ways, it's kind of like multiplying. And when you have that sort of multiplier effect, you just kind of run out of food to feed them in some way, you know. So you have to really just start approaching it from at a higher level.
I like that. So this article you sent us is about, like you said, changing policy and getting these group of women together. So you kind of like pulled these women together and y'all said, you know what, we're going to make a difference. And so are you addressing, I know you're addressing like political issues. What have you done to address like racism?
Oh, well,
I know that's political too, right?
well, yeah, you know, because I mean, like you said, racism is a systematic thing, and a system is built by policymakers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And elected official, and it doesn't just come into being by some, you know, accidental default type of thing. It's very intentional.
Mm-hmm.
And a thing that I still kick myself in the butt on certain days is that, you know, in my early 20s, in my early 30s, I didn't see that. I really didn't see how that fabric was laid down so thick for so long, you know? And it's going to take a long time to unwind that. But in order to unwind that, you actually have to set and put in a new set of policy. And how do you do that? You have to have the right policy makers to actually even think about doing stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm. And so yeah, that's also my approach to racism, because it's very embedded into our entire system at every single layer, and you have to just unwind it from the way that they have embedded it in the first place, you know.
I love it.
And I also tell like some of my friends this, it's like, it's great for you to do protests and everything. And I've done protests myself, but with any sort of communication, you have to really, when you communicate, you have to, one, really believe that the other person you're communicating to actually want to listen to you. And if they don't, you know, the game is over. So to protest to any leaders that don't really give a damn about who you are, it's not effective. I mean, I don't know how to make that, you know, nicer or sugarcoat.
You don't have to.
It's really the reality. It's like, so how do you change it? You just flip the decision maker.
You have to. So this is great. And you started this in 2009, it says? Or no, I'm sorry. When did you start this?
2017. Yeah, 2017 on November 9th. But I mean, that's one of the projects that I work on. You know, I also work with Oxfam, which is the whole mission is to alleviating poverty from around the world. And that is a non-political organization. I'm actually also working, this is still kind of confidential, but working with a food organization in the Seattle area. To, again, like I said, you know, it's nice to try to work on policy changes, but if people are starving, then you have to continue to starve them. I mean, to feed them too. So a lot of our approaches have to be a combination of both. We can't just sit there and take have the luxury to choose one side or the other.
I appreciate that. Thank you. This has been awesome thus far. I want to take a pause really quickly because we have about 20 folks on the line and we have questions. If you have questions for Uyen, please type them in the chat box. You know, this is going well, it's going great, and I have my own questions, but this is for you guys to hear from an expert that's in the industry, hear from her, hear what some of the struggles are, and to also ask your questions. So if you have questions, this is a great time for you to put them in the chat box. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to ask another question. So when you think about you talked a little bit about your history of being a refugee, coming from a science background, going into entrepreneurship, even the struggles of entrepreneurship. What else can you tell us about your personal economic story or journey? Like, who was your greatest influence in life? I know you keep saying, you know, I regret that I didn't do this until later, but really you need to be gentle with yourself because you're doing it now. And you're making a huge difference. Like, seriously, I know sometimes sometimes we just think about what you coulda, shoulda, woulda, but you're doing an amazing job right now. So who are some of the people that have influenced you and influenced your story and made you the woman that you are today?
Yeah, I would say the single most important person and influencer in my life has been my mom. She passed away when she was only 10, but when I was only 10. But, you know, it's a very, very humble woman and frankly, one of the most effective leader I've ever known. But I actually did not know I didn't realize it until, again, probably in my mid-30s or so. Because, you know, I think most people, and especially in an Asian culture, you grow up thinking that leaders are one men and then two are a little bit more vocal, you know, like in command and all of that. And it wasn't until after my mom passed away that I just see like so much of the falling out of our family and just and realize that she was the glue that held it all together, you know, and she managed her 12 siblings. They had a lot of kids back in those days. So 12 siblings and then, you know, and then my dad's side of the family. And it was just like, she had a very gentle, quiet approach to her. And so it just really flipped my thinking on what a leader really looked like, you know? And it's something that we kind of learn in business school, but it didn't really just, sometimes you read one thing and then it doesn't really hit you until, you know, that kind of like defining moment type of thing. And so, and then also, I think she really reshaped my priorities because again, you know, I did have a very kind of lucrative career and being a director of investment in private equity firm, you know, like even nowadays when I give this kind of talk, I actually have one guy, it's like, yeah, it's nice that you own a restaurant, but can you tell me about how you got into venture capital? I was like, oh no. Because I mean, so many people, that's what they want to do. That's kind of like the title that you aim for, right? And so how she influenced me to really just kind of reset myself was that I don't know. I think I just started seeing so much inequality around the world. And frankly, I find that small business owners are actually some of the most honest people that you see around there. Like my dad and I, we used to get into arguments about, you know, he's very much pro everything US. And I mean, I love this country, but at the same time, it's to the point where you can't make any criticism of it because any kind of sort of, you know, point that I would make regarding how, for example, like he would say, you know, he actually got swindled by this American and lost pretty much his entire fortune. But how he got con into that was like he's like Americans, they don't lie, you know, like they have very honest business practice, and so he trusts all the Vietnamese and he placed all this emphasis on this white guy that came to Vietnam and just kind of screw over a lot of people. But my point to him was like, well, look at Enron, look at, you know, like some of these corruption that is happening around the world. And so I guess my it's a long-winded way of saying that, you know, my finance background actually gave me a deeper understanding of how money moves around the world and where actually some of the deepest corruption also happen. And so in many ways, it started just kind of pivoting my thought around how I guess honorable like small business are, you know. I didn't look at it in that. I have to say, I didn't look at it in that lens when I was growing up, because again, you know, as an Asian, you typically are told a couple of jobs that you should do, but I can guarantee you most of them do not revolve around being a small business owner, because it's viewed as like, okay, that's what an immigrant with no education would do. Everyone else, you know, who has an education would go and be director of private equity like I was, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So in many ways, it was kind of like a view of a step backward, but but I don't know. I think my mom really reshaped my thinking about how you can what is a good job, I guess, one thing, and then the other is what's really important in life too.
I love it. We know that your mom is super proud of you. We know that she would be super proud of you. How's your dad and your relationship? I know you said you went and visited him at the beginning of this year and all that. Is he proud of like the decisions you've made, or is he like, girl, you better go get that job back?
I don't know if any of the ladies on here have this kind of relationship with their dad, but my dad, I challenge him the most out of all my siblings. You know, I have two other brothers. We had a lot more siblings when I was growing up, but unfortunately they passed away. So the three of us are the remainder, and I'm the middle child. And I challenge him in every single front, you know, in terms of his thinking. And he's pretty much kind of like a dictator in our family, you know. It's his way on the highway, and for me, I often take the highway. So he's like, no, come back, you know. I mean, it's not quite that drastic, but it's basically because I've been so independent since I was young, and not by choice per se, but because of the outcome of a refugee situation. You know, he remained in Vietnam, and it was me and my older brother who made it to the States. So we raised himself, and so he couldn't put in on that typical guilt that he based, you know, a lot of Asian parents would do to their kid is like, you know, I raised you, I put a roof over your, you know, your head, and you have to listen. I was like, well, I kind of raised myself. I mean, I don't mean to be ungrateful to him, but I was like, you know, you can't take that away from me either. And so we have that kind of challenge. But at the same time, he would be the first to tell you that if any crisis happen, I'm the first one he calls. So
I love it. He like that strong-minded girl there. Let me call her.
I know. He's like, well, you get shit done. I was like, okay.
I love it. What do you think about Washington's reopening strategy? Even if the state reopens completely, what do you think it will take to make people comfortable spending money to dine out again, especially with the increased economic uncertainty? And that's from one of the folks in the class. That's from Dylan.
Okay, yeah. So I think, you know, with almost everything like this, it really falls into two extreme camps. And of course, there are people that are more in the middle. But it looks very much like our political landscape right now. I think there are going to be people who are just so eager to have the restaurant open, and they can't wait to just go and, you know, gather with their friends and so on. Because I think now that you can have 4 people sitting together, like for phase 2, 4 people sitting together, even if you're not quarantine, you know, sheltering in place together. And then there's the other camp, which frankly I fall into, because even though I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a scientist at heart, and I just don't think that we're in a safe spot, you know. And so the first decision is that, you know, we're not going to reopen during the phase 2. We're just going to continue to do our takeout. And because of my science background, I have a lot of friends who are in healthcare right now, and I don't want to do that to them, you know. I just don't want to be the people that just start, you know, flooding the hospital again. And it doesn't take much. I mean, again, it's a multiplier effect. It's a virus. It doesn't, you know. So I'll give you an example. So one of my colleagues, his mom was visiting the country, and she came here just to visit her kids, and also, you know, just to get some healthcare stuff done and so on. She's from Mexico. And so with the whole shutdown, she couldn't go back home. And she stayed with one of her son and her daughter. But in the meanwhile, she really missed her other son, who was in who who is living in the so a little bit south of Seattle. And so anyhow, she just really missed him, and she missed her grandkids. So she made the decision to go and visit him one day. A couple of days later, she got sick.
Oh.
And then a couple of days later, my colleague got sick. And it turns out, you know, it caused a huge panic for us too, because we're like, okay, contact tracing now, you know, who were you in contact with and all of that. And luckily, none of us were infected by it, you know. But his mom is in the ICU right now. And his brother is kicking himself in the butt because his brother is the one that did not take it seriously. Whereas, you know, my colleague, because I've been hammering the message to them for a long time, he took it seriously. But again, you can take it seriously, but if someone you're living with or someone you're hanging out with doesn't take it seriously, then it just kind of falls all apart. And so just that one decision, you know, there are actually five people who got infected all within the family, and the mom is still in the ICU. And basically the doctor said, there's nothing else we can do for her except just to let her be there intubated. And if she gets better, she gets better. But if she's not, then she, you know. And so it does not take much to actually cause a chain reaction of many different cases. So, and I don't want that to happen at New, you know. So we basically are not going to open until I really feel that we're in a safe spot, and I just don't think we're in a safe spot. However, with that said, I really do want to also emphasize the other point. I don't want to make it seem like other, you know, restaurateurs are in the bad for trying to open up their place, because here's where the infrastructure and also just, you know, the lack of just support from our government, right? Because you just can't ask people to shutter and have no financial protection and have no way of just no way to earn a living, and to do all these things that is required by the government, you know, and to embrace it in a way that actually is also good for society. So I do think that there's going to be a lot of people who are just so strapped with their finances now that they will open because they need the income, right?
Yeah.
And it will cause a lot of, you know, headache down the road too. But I guess we don't really give them that much of an option, right?
Yeah.
Because like, at least with my landlord, we don't get a loan deferment. We don't get loan subsidy. We don't get any of that. We just continue to have to pay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get it. I definitely get it. Tesha has a question, and it's along the same line. She said, what do you need from the local policymakers, whether it's city, county, or state, to protect your business and the workers and community in the current pandemic and the economic crisis? Not just you, but what can some of the other restaurants, you know, like the ones you just mentioned that need to open up? What do you need from these local policymakers that will help you to kind of sustain yourself through this period of
pandemic? So the right way to open, and I think the state and the city government is trying to do this, is that, you know, there's safe distancing and so forth. But since you've been to our restaurant, if I were to, let's say, plan out that safe distancing in my restaurant, you probably have 6 people sitting in there, right?
Yeah, that's it.
6 feet apart. It's a tall, tiny restaurant. So that basically translates to the same thing that I'm dealing with right now, which is our revenue will still continue to be about 10 to 20% of what it looks like, you know, when we were doing takeout. But now we're just increasing more risk by having people inside the restaurant. And because they're eating, they're not going to be able to wear masks and so on. So financially, it doesn't look right for me but other restaurants will try to do this, especially if they have a bigger space and so on. But at the end of the day, the income is not going to be enough, you know, relative to what they used to make. So it really comes down to financial, you know, and so financial subsidy and helping us stay afloat of that. I'm not a big component of just requiring the landlord to just basically forgive or just, you know, forcing them into giving us free rent either. Partly because, I mean, yeah, you definitely have like huge private equity firm that do own some of these real estate and they do have deep pocket. But there are a decent number of landlords who are just people like you and me who happen to have, right. And so when we pass the buck to them, the economic impact just continue, right? It just and they will find other ways to just kind of like punish us for that. And so I guess my downer look in this is that in many ways I feel like we're a little bit too late with what we need to do for this
with
round.
Strategy.
Yeah, especially at the federal level, because you know, what we can try to do is at the local level, but even the local level, we don't, I mean, I haven't looked into the budget of it, but I did dig into, you know, revenue that Washington State get from tax payment and stuff. And because of we rely on so much on sales tax, and now there's not much sales going on, you know, that sort of that big part of our budget is going to be decreasing by a lot too. So where are we going to get the money, right? And so there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be hurting through this whole process. And so the short term, I honestly don't know if there's much we can do, except maybe to encourage some of these. You know, we have a trillionaire that lives in our city, so maybe asking him to do something, you know?
Billionaires. And that's a good segue to Nicole's question. She says, aside from, you know, what can we do as individuals, aside from taking takeout from restaurants and tipping really well, you know, what can we do to help out? You know, we can't really depend on our government. We know that, right? So what can we do as individuals? What is, in your opinion, what can we do?
Yeah, you know, I think the big part is right now what we need, not only us, but just a lot of small business, right? We just need revenue. And a lot of entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs because we're fiercely independent. We're not looking for subsidies per se, you know, we're not looking for a handout. It's just, that's not what drives us to become entrepreneur in the first place. What drives us is, you know, to ability to support ourselves, ability to just innovate, ability to be very independent, you know, that's just kind of like the bread and butter of pretty much all the entrepreneurs out there. So the best way to help us is to continue to be loyal supporter and customer, you know, and whether you do it in gift card form or you just buy food or whatever other method of just supporting businesses during regular time, you just do it more now in harder time. And I also would say be kind. I really do think a lot of people are doing that, but once in a while you get those people that just really expect everything to be in the normal phase, and we're just not anywhere near normal. I mean, like, yeah, I would love for it to be normal, but it's not. So we just have to face the reality.
This is the new normal. We
yeah,
just gotta deal with it.
Yeah, the food is not going to be tasting as great because it's been in this to-go box for, you know, and transport for a while, you know. And I was telling some of the moderator before a lot of the attendees got on this call earlier that, you know, practice the common sense too, you know, and hold the other customer also accountable for it, because sometimes we small business get slammed for so let me just tell you the story. So one customer got really mad at us because some of the other customer were not practicing social distancing. And if you've been to our store our restaurant right now, we have this takeout window where basically we block ourselves and our customer, you know, so it's hard for us to go out, and this customer can't come in, and we have these signs that say, you know, stay 6 feet apart, but not everybody does. And, you know, so this one customer got really mad at us and say they don't, you know, they don't enforce the social distancing, but it's really hard for us to enforce, especially when I only have one front of house person working, and, you know, she's dealing with the takeout and trying to answer phone calls and all that. So, I mean, it's a very minor example, but if you see someone not practicing social distancing, for example, if you're a customer, just tell them, you know, so tell them on behalf of us, say, you know, there's a sign that says you should not stand close to each other.
This is Seattle. This is Seattle. People are not going to tell somebody to back up. Get up, back up off of me. Give me 6 feet.
I know. Be New Yorkers. I don't know.
Be New Yorkers. There's another question I think you kind of answered this, and maybe she asked it while you were answering it, but I'm going to just ask the question anyways, and if you have anything to add, please do so. Sure. Grace asks, we've heard a lot about the rent relief for residential housing. What do you think about the rent relief assistance for commercial enterprises, restaurants, and other commercial establishments? Do you think that some restaurants will remain on takeout only after the lockdown is lifted, and what are the implications of this for the restaurant industry and the economy? Like I said, I think you kind of answered both of these questions.
So, I mean, the rent relief, I'm a big believer in shared responsibility. I'm not a big believer in just shifting responsibility. So I think all of us have to just kind of look at it from that lens, or I want us to. Even when I had a talk with my landlord, you know, I told them, I'm like, I'm not looking for you to just like pretend that our rent does not exist, but I'm asking you to acknowledge the fact that 80% of what I rented from you, I can't use anymore, you know, like I can't seat people in there. I basically am using the kitchen, I'm using the takeout window, I'm not even using the bar. So I'm not looking for you to just say, okay, your rent is completely forgiven, but I'm asking you to work with me, you know? And I basically was very frank with them too, because I mean, they said that you guys are one of the people who actually hustle from, you know, our portfolio of renters, basically, or tenants. And I was like, well, for that exact reason, that's why you need to keep us alive, because if we're hustling and we're honest with you and we tell you we might not be able to make this if you actually don't work with us, then work with us, you know?
Right.
So, but they didn't do anything.
I like your boldness. I love your boldness.
So that part is, and then so regarding the takeout, I think I already mentioned that. It's very unlikely that I would be opening our restaurant up again for just dine-in service until we're like at phase 4. So, and up until that point, we'll just continue to innovate, figure out how we can sell stuff, you know? Package it with the flowers. I don't know. But
you gotta repackage everything.
Yeah.
I just want to acknowledge some of the comments. Tesha she had to log off, but she said, "Thank you so much for sharing your inspiring stories." Nacy said, "You're such an inspiration." And then Julie said, "People in Seattle are passive." And then Amber just said, "They'll take a picture and post it on social media instead of just saying, 'Give me 6 feet, bruh.'" I was in Fred Meyer's the other day, and we were going down the aisle, and this woman just come, and I was just like, "Whoa, wait!" I was like, 6 feet, and she just looked at me like I cussed her out. But I'm like, "Girl, I don't want whatever you got. Like, you don't know what I got. Like, just stay back."
I know.
I ain't from here, so I'll say that type of stuff. We have about 10 minutes. We don't have any more questions from the audience, but I have several more. I do want to ask you though, do you have any like success stories that you want to share? I know we talked a little bit about some of the things that have gone awry, some of the things that have gone, and we did talk about the flowers and the community effort and kind of collaborating together. But do you have any other stories that you would say, you know what, this really inspired me during this time? Maybe it's in the restaurant industry, maybe not.
Yeah, no, it actually goes back to the flower thing, you know. Tara Clark is someone who was featured in the news for working with Hmong farmers. And as of yesterday, I think she helped them sell 335,000
Wow,
dollars worth of flowers.
that's awesome.
And the way that she started it, I was just basically just calling her friend and saying, how can I help? And she plopped a chair in front of her house and just post on Facebook and say, hey, you know, any of you guys want bouquet? And she was selling them for $20 per bouquet. And before she knows it, you know, all the 50 bouquet that she ordered for that day was sold out before even anyone come and pick it up.
Wow.
And so anyhow, just seeing her effort really inspired me because we joke among the refugee community that that's a very refugee move to do. You know, it's just like you're at your last straw. You just kind of like plop the chair somewhere and you just sell stuff. You know, it's like survival mode there. But simple thing like that actually blossom into this whole big effort of now helping a lot of the Hmong farmers, and a lot of these Hmong farmers are the ones that sell at the Pike marketplace, you know? So it's not only help them survive, but, you know, frankly, it kind of helped us too, because the flowers were by far my favorite part of Pike's marketplace. And when this
Yeah, me
whole
too.
thing is over, I want them to be there, you know? But
Yeah.
they're not going to be there unless we support them. So anyhow, within that initiative, she started recruiting a bunch of friends to start selling flowers with her too. And then I have also another friend who, Katie Zimmon, they both are photographer too, for whatever reason. But she started selling flower to help a different group of Hmong and Mien farmers. And they have brought in over 200,000
Wow.
of revenue for this farmer too. So why is that so inspiring for me is that it really brings it back down to just entrepreneurship, right? You don't have to go big. You don't have to have these fancy idea. You don't even have to have a website, really. I mean, they literally started with just posting it on Facebook, and then they migrated to a Google Doc as an order form, and as of today that's still the case. You know, I think a lot they're working to put a website together, and in a combination of both of them they have made more than $500,000 for the
Wow.
farmers that would have, like, all these beautiful flower would have died and missed revenue opportunity. So so luckily now they're actually roping me along with this. So some of them are starting to sell again. I mentioned our jerk chicken. They're selling our cocktail. I don't even know if it's legal. If you guys are in the city government, please forgive us. We're just trying to. I don't know what the hell we're doing.
Like, arrest her.
I know. But it's inspiring.
It is.
It's probably one of the most inspiring story that I see through this whole crisis,
Yeah.
because again, it just takes a lot of heart and intention and just believing that possibility that you can actually do something to help other people. And again, it doesn't need to be fancy. It doesn't have to be, you know, this grandiose thing. But frankly, by the amount of effort, revenue that they brought in, they've done more for the city than most of the wealthier folks who have a lot more means, right? So
That is beautiful. I love it. And I love to hear these stories. And I didn't know about the flowers, but I see Amberin said, you know, she got all of her Mother's Day flowers from them. And I didn't even think about it or know about it, but Mother's Day definitely was a great time for flowers, right? So
right.
that's awesome. I love that campaign. I'm actually going to look for it on Facebook when we get off of here. But
Yeah.
we really appreciate you, Uyen. I thank you for being so candid, for telling your story, and just being the bold woman that you are. You really are an inspiration. And
Thank
I'm like
you.
your dad right now. I'm like, oh, she got it. Whatever. I don't know. If there's a problem, we need to call somebody like her because she got it. So I appreciate that. It's about 9:54. So what I'll do is I'll wrap up here.
Okay.
Guys, if you have additional questions, anything that you want, any thoughts you want to leave us with?
Me or
Yes.
your classmate? I
No,
mean your class.
no, you.
Um, I would say, you know, So when Julie asked me to become a a speaker for this series, and I think this is my third time doing it. I always try to make time for it because I really like the mission that you're trying to do here. Is really just look at leadership in different perspective, and also leadership with a heart, right?
Yes.
And I would say that this is probably the biggest opportunity to be a leader right now. It is not the future. It's not like once you graduate. None of that. It's right now. And
Mm.
so and because you all come with such great experience already, you didn't need this class per se, but this class allows you to bring this, to have this cohort, this like-minded group of people. I would say use that to examine what you can do right now, because it's so needed right now. This I I would tell my friends and also myself, this is a virus. It's multiplying. To counter it, our effort have to multiply faster than it in order for to overcome it. So it's time to work harder. It's time to work smarter. It's time to do all of that, and just don't wait until you graduate to do that. So
I love that. Thank you so much. You're such an inspiration and a great leader. You can see the comments in the chat box. People are like, yes, they want you to be president. They want to come and get a cocktail kit.
cocktail kid, people, cocktail kid, happy hour.
Well, we appreciate you. We appreciate your time, your stories, your insight, and that we appreciate you being the woman and the woman leader that you are. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this forum. I appreciate
Yes,
it.
we appreciate you. And just for you guys that to know, it's 9:57. We're logging off at 10 for those that are not in LT 2020. Later on today, we have another conversation